So we've just got Sean to join, but the recording has started, everyone.
Okay. Shall we go ahead without Sean, or shall we wait?
If you'd like to do introductions so that everyone watching knows who every speaker is, that would be ideal, please, Commissioner.
Okay. Well, a good afternoon to all of you joining us for this live stream strategic board meeting. My name is Festus Akinbuso, and I'm the Police and Crime Commissioner for Bedfordshire. And just for your information, this is the meeting where, as PCC and ably supported by our Chief Executive Claire Kelly, who will introduce herself shortly, we get to have good discussions with the senior leadership team of Bedfordshire Police around some key issues affecting policing and delivery of policing to all of our residents in the county. So without further ado, can I just ask everyone to just briefly introduce themselves, and then we shall proceed with the meeting. Can I start with you, Gary?
Can indeed. Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Gary Forsyth. I'm the Chief Constable of Bedfordshire Police.
Claire?
Good afternoon, everyone. Claire Kelly, Chief Executive here at the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner for Bedfordshire.
Gavin?
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, all. I'm Gavin Chambers, Chief Financial Officer for the Office of the PCC.
Rachel?
Hi everyone, I'm Rachel Glendenning and I am the Chief Constable Staff Officer.
Madeline?
Hello, I'm Maddie Dogrel. I work in the exec and I'm the Staff Officer for the Deputy Chief Constable.
Phil?
Afternoon all, I'm Phil Wells, I'm Assistant Chief Officer in the Force.
And Sean, please.
Hi, Sean Basra, Temporary Assistant Chief Constable, Beds Police, responsible for local policing and crime.
Thank you very much. Now, we don't have the other two on video at the moment, but I would like them to introduce themselves anyway. Katie and Gemma, would you?
Hello, I'm Katie Beaumont. I'm the Transparency Manager for the OPCC.
And I'm Gemma McCormack, Executive Assistant for the Commissioner and for Claire Kelly.
All right, thank you very much, everyone, for the introductions. So we'll just start with the first agenda item, which is updates from me about the police and crime plan. So far, so good, thanks to the excellent work that the office have been doing ahead of me coming into this role. Quite a lot of the plans have already been put in place as far as the police and crime plan is concerned. To the point where we are now able to go to public consultation, which is a requirement of all police and crime commissioners as far as the plan is concerned, on the 5th of July, which is going to be next week. Is it next week, Monday, I believe? We'll be going to consultation, and but the plan is that we will be going live in August with the plan, which will then run for the course of the 3 years of this term. So a lot of the things that you see in there will be the things that you've heard me talk ad nauseum about over the last 15 months. I'm sorry, but we're certainly very determined to ensure that we're delivering on the people's policing priorities, working very closely in partnership with the senior officers that you're seeing here and our officers, of course, in Bedfordshire Police. But yeah, I mean, it's so far so good. Anything else you want to add to that, Claire?
No, only, Commissioner, that as per your direction, we want to get this survey out to as many members of the public, different community groups and individuals as we can. It will run through until the 6th of August, but that's not the end of the consultation. We'll just do a different version and then go back out to some specific community groups to help us to make sure that the language in it is accessible and that it's a real plan for the people, by the people.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. And then we will, does anyone have any questions they want to ask about that process at the moment? Anyone? No? Okay. I'm glad we're all in agreement on that. Excellent. So we must be doing a good job, Claire. So we move on to the next agenda item, which is around community policing. And I'll ask ACC Sean Bajor if you can just give us an update on the community policing model, please.
Okay, thank you. Our community policing model is based around two functions, really. One is the local community hubs, and within there we have police officers and PCSOs, including officers of different ranks. The current establishment of that area with regards to police officers and in the main PCs is 67, and we're currently running at 64 against that 67. So in the hub base, there's 3 gaps, but what we have got is we've got a postings meeting coming up, and we're confident that that 67 will be up to full strength by September at the latest. Now, that community hub model doesn't deal with all the community policing in its own in isolation, because what we have got to support them are other teams, such as our rural crime team, community enforcement team, community cohesion, and the mental health hub and hate crime. So it's a collective approach to community policing, but that hub is the core part to it. Including within those officers, we have our dedicated Police Now students who really focus on problem solving and different areas and considerations within problem solving that are specific to community policing. So they add great value in terms of that longer term solution. What we've also got in terms of initiatives and changes to support community policing is we've changed our special constabulary model, and we've aligned some of those resources to our community hubs as well. So sometimes our specials, because of the excellent work that they do on top of their day-to-day lives, it's often that they provide that policing presence out of hours. So we've aligned those to the hubs as well. And the last, the two I'll mention in terms of initiatives, both in terms of supporting visibility and engagement with our local communities. One is the pilot of a social media academy, which will be piloted within community policing, and how we can make better use of social media to support and showcase the work we're doing. And finally, the reintroduction of our Operation Vision Days, which were hugely successful in terms of focusing on different areas at different times and really saturating that location. Now, that's not just saturating it in terms of policing presence, but raising awareness of certain issues and priorities bespoke to that local area. I'll pause there because I'm sure others may wish to add some further detail and or have some questions.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that, Sean. It's really good to. I'm always pleased whenever I hear there was special constables mentioned in any meeting. I claim no special interest, of course, in that. So thank you very much for mentioning that. Just a couple of questions for you, please. What reassurance can you give around the deployment and focus of officers to the community policing teams? I mean, are we going to be having these officers primarily just dedicated to community policing, or what are the likelihood of them being deployed elsewhere? Now, I understand there might be operational demands for them to go wherever, and that's just the way policing is. But assuming that is not going to be the norm, are we going to be having these officers just dedicated to doing community policing? And lastly, what have we decided that community policing is going to be in Bedfordshire?
Okay, I'll answer both of those to start with, and I'm sure others will add some further detail. When the Chief Constable came into office, he made a promise to really prioritise local community neighbourhood policing. And that's what we've sought to do throughout. And if you look at our dedication of those resources, and I know, Festus, you've been really visible and active in going out and visiting all our teams across the organisation, you'll see that we have got some stretched teams, but our dedication is across the board, and we prioritise neighbourhood policing. And we understand and agree when we speak with our communities through our campaign of Have Your Say, what those local priorities are. So we're committed to dealing with those local priorities aligned to the hubs, and those officers will be dedicated to that type of response. Rightly, as you articulate, sometimes emergencies, critical incidents dictate that we move resources, but our bottom line is we will prioritise community policing and provide that neighbourhood response. I'll pause there in case anyone's got any follow-up before I move on to the next one.
So if you can just, so I'm just gonna, before I come to you, Gary, so if you could just, for the benefit of those who might be listening, you know, what would community policing look like to our residents? What would it look like? Again,
it's twofold. One is that hub focus in terms of local footprint for local areas. Now we can't have visibility in terms of all areas, every ward throughout the county. So we've identified core hubs from where our community policing will be based, and then patrol and provide that reassurance in those local areas. Much of that will come through demand pieces as well, but what we've also done to support that is our response function. They have outposts as well, so our response function, although predominantly based north and south, they have satellite stations where they are deployed from to add that visibility. So in terms of what it looks like, as close as we can possibly get to having local officers who know their local area and are available and accessible to our local communities.
Right. Very good. Thank you very much. Chief?
Thank you, and thanks, Sean. I'll just add to that a little bit, if I might. Firstly, when it comes to the issue of abstractions, we have invested significantly in our neighbourhood policing function, and I did make that as one of my areas of focus throughout my selection process and on my appointment, and it remains very much an incredibly important part of our policing posture here in Bedfordshire. It's something that I am deeply committed to. I speak as an ex-neighbourhood police officer, and it's something that I recognise is very important to the public, and it's very important to me. It is, I like to think of it as the foundation stone of our policing model, because that's exactly where, you know, the first point of interaction takes place very often between the police and the public, and it's crucial to having good relationships which then drive good information, good intelligence, which then enables us to layer on all the other capabilities that are so essential to us delivering across the board. So absolutely strongly committed to neighbourhood policing. The abstraction point around that, because we've invested in it, we should be in a position where we don't need to abstract, but actually we also know that we are the police, we're an emergency service, and, you know, we are all police officers first and specialists second. So if there is something which is an emerging emergency that requires the abstraction of a beat officer, then of course we will do that to do that. And I think there's sometimes an ongoing discussion around what a neighbourhood officer might think of as an abstraction and what I might think of as an abstraction, because I don't view them responding to an emergency in the locality where they're based as necessarily being an abstraction. Whereas they would say, well, that's not necessarily within the pure remit that we've got, so they might see it as such. What we shouldn't be doing is we shouldn't be saying taking a neighbourhood officer from Dunstable and then deploying them to a job in Kempston. That shouldn't be happening. And it will happen in extremis, but that shouldn't be, you know, a regular occurrence. But, you know, anything that's happening on the beat of a local neighbourhood officer should be of concern and interest to them. So I think it's legitimate for us to utilise them in that locality for sometimes assisting with some elements of demand when we're in extreme positions. I think I just want to come on and develop a little bit of what Sean said, and I'll try and do this in a way which actually makes sense to the public as well, because in terms of what neighbourhood policing looks like, then there is actually a recognised model for what neighbourhood policing is, and it's called the 7 pillars of neighbourhood policing. Now, I won't go through all 7 of them because 4 of them won't really make much difference to the public in terms of how it's delivered to them, but it makes a difference to us internally and how we structure them. But what the public should be seeing with the good delivery of neighbourhood policing is they should get engaging communities, solving problems, and targeting activity. Now, those are the pillar titles that are within that. So what I want within that is I want police officers who are known and recognisable to the local community they're working in as neighbourhood officers. I want them to be knowledgeable about the things that are taking place and the activity and criminality that's taking place in that area. I want them to be skilled and equipped to provide sustainable policing interventions. So I don't want us just to be responding to demand all the time. I want us to be getting upstream and putting in targeted interventions, which mean that we can turn off some of the demand that we experience later on in the policing model. And they should be working absolutely hand in glove with the community to address the local concerns that they've got, as well as addressing some of the strategic and tactical priorities that we identify as an organisation. So it's very much the frontline interface with the public and operational problem solvers who are skilled, highly equipped and highly motivated. And the most important thing for me is, you know, neighbourhood policing sometimes in policing has been seen as a bit of a role which people didn't want to go into. Now, because of how we are building the capacity and providing the skills to our police officers, we're in a position now where we've got people waiting to go into neighbourhood policing, which is exactly how I want it to be, because that should be absolutely the flagship of our policing model, and we should have amongst the very best neighbourhood policing services anywhere in the country.
And I will say, you know, I've been to, as you mentioned, Sean, I have kept myself somewhat busy visiting a couple of the some of our community policing hubs. I've been to the one in Dunstable, Leighton Buzzard, that covers Leighton Buzzard as well. There was the one in Marsh for My Futures, and I really was. It was nice to just see police officers who actually wanted to be in community, and they actually feel, you know, very, very invested in that part of policing. So I look forward to seeing the unfolding and the outcome of this community policing plan as from September onwards. And I think we've got down to get an update on that. I think in January, wasn't it? We said at last meeting, Claire, I believe.
Yeah, there will be a further update in January when it's been populated for a significant amount of time. Yes.
Yeah. You got your hand up.
Yeah, just a couple of questions, if I can, please, Commissioner. Sean, you mentioned that there were a few vacancies. Where are those vacancies at the moment?
All three of them are in the south central, Claire.
Okay, brilliant. We've been doing quite a few of the roadshows with the different community groups, and I was just noticing that vacancies were popping up. And at the last strategic board, we had an update that there was only one vacancy. So I was just wondering what had happened there. But I think there are plans that they come in eventually, aren't there? So we'll be at full establishment. And then the other question.
And we're looking at having a full establishment by September.
By September 21. Okay.
Just on that, if I could just come in, because sometimes when we have a full establishment, what that doesn't translate to is necessarily a full establishment at all of the hubs. So we might say to you, we've got full establishment, when in fact we're over-established in one location and under-established in another. So the overall establishment is fully populated, but the local establishment necessarily isn't. But we're trying to make sure that that's absolutely clear.
Do you know what? I'd accept that if it wasn't full. We asked for names last time and we had them all named in the different areas. So we did have that, but never mind.
And that's absolutely right. I'm saying it won't always necessarily correlate, but we can always provide the names. That's not a problem. Yeah,
we had those when we thought it was full. The next question is around the website. So again, at these community interaction meetings that we were having, councillors were saying to us that they build great relationships with the community officers, but then, as is the nature of policing, people move on. But what's not happening is that people are saying that they're moving on and they don't give those contact details to the incoming officers. I wanted to go back to the councillors and say, but you could always go on our website and pop in your postcode and you could see. But I tried that for myself on quite a few different areas, and I was seeing names that I knew weren't right in the area. So I think if we're not going to be communicating with our councillors, key individual networks, then we need to make sure that our outgoing information is spot on so that people have got that access back. I think that would be really important for community policing. That was it. Thank you.
Yeah, just to kind of come back on the communication bit. I mean, I appreciate it's always a fluid situation, and you know, people coming in and out, and things will never be a stable figure or situation all the time. So I really appreciate that. And can I just thank you for your efforts and focus in putting together this plan. And, I really am excited to see this bed in from September. And obviously, whatever we can do to work with you, to support you in making this a much more of a success, I'm totally in support of that. I think, Sean, you have some more you wanted to contribute on the community, or is that it? That it? Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Now, on the effectiveness, on the next agenda item, I think, Claire, this is your bit.
Yeah, 11.1 and 11.2 are very intrinsically linked, Commissioner. So this is around your commitment to the victim needs analysis that we did. We have found that there are over 20 different objectives we need to do in Bedfordshire to make sure that we are being compliant with what people who've been affected by crime need here. We have now got all those timetabled so that they'll be delivered by April 21, and those updates will come here so that we can communicate them back to the public. Linked with that is around the service that they get through Signpost, which is that hub for people who have been affected directly or indirectly, i.e. a family member or relative who has seen someone go through a criminality experience and needs some support. For a long time, we weren't at the rates that we wanted. Last month, we did finally get to the sort of rate that we would want, which meant that police officers were making the right referrals into that service. It has dropped slightly, but we are still in the right hundreds of figures that we are wanting to look at. The good news in that area is the expansion. So we are moving towards supporting people when they've been the victim of fraud, because currently you don't get much support elsewhere with that, as well as robbery. And eventually we will move that support service to those that are affected by antisocial behaviour. So at the minute, because it isn't a listed type that the service does, there isn't that support built out there, but we are going to have that brought in eventually. And then 11.3, we wanted a discussion around victim satisfaction in force, specifically around VCOP and how we were doing with keeping people. So again, VCOP is the victim code of practice. So this is that thing where we all within this system are making pledges towards keeping people up to date, that they've got fair access to information. And that one's over to Sean, I think.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, I'll talk briefly about all three elements: victim satisfaction, dissatisfaction and complaints, wrap in how the public can contribute and make contact, but more importantly talk about our next steps and how as a learning organisation we always seek to improve. So in terms of being a victim of crime, currently we have a system in place where we utilise internal resources to conduct surveys with our victims of crime. Now, what we've noticed and what we've identified is that we're not able to reach out because of competing demands and capacity to as many victims as possible to get that rich picture in terms of what that actually looks like and feels like to our victims of crime. Hence why we're seeking to involve technology and looking at IT solutions no different to when the likes of us buy something online or buy something from a shop, and within seconds you can use your phone to track back and leave some feedback. So that's one of the areas of development for us. In terms of dissatisfaction and complaints, so members of the public can contact us through our website and other forum. And if you look at our website, there's a tile page on the feedback, and you can contact us highlighting three key things. One is telling us how we did, one is submitting a complaint, and the other being a compliment. And what happens with those is they come into our customer service team. Our customer service team will then identify whether it is a complaint, in which case it will be directed to our professional standards department, or whether it's dissatisfaction. If it's dissatisfaction, they will then record the details of that dissatisfaction. As part of that dissatisfaction, that does take into account VCOP compliance. Now, VCOP compliance Some of the more simplistic ways of identifying this and articulating it is if, let's say, for example, you haven't been updated in terms of the progress of your investigation, or if you've got, or if you're dissatisfied by levels of service. Now, currently, what happens there is it's only identified as VCOP, and then the operator from within our customer support team emails and contacts both the officer and the supervisor referencing that crime report, and that is then aligned to our VCOP compliance, of which our data extracts support how effective we are there. One of the issues that we've identified, and I'm grateful to the OPCC because we've commissioned a recent internal audit in relation to our complaints and dissatisfaction handling, is okay, what next? And they're the areas that we want to learn from in terms of extracting that detail. Because under VCOP, there are 12 areas of real importance that we need to show and satisfy our victims of crime, because we prioritise that victim experience and the victim journey. But at the moment, we can only extract that it is VCOP as a whole. So that's some of the, again, we're seeking to utilise technology to make sure that we can extract that detail and that data, which we then can use to pick up trends and learn as an organisation to improve the service that we provide.
So you don't currently have that information, but you're going to, and then we'd be able to look at how compliant the 12 areas are. Brilliant. Do you know when you'll be able to kind of share that level of information?
Sorry, I should just come in because whilst we have that aspiration to do that, then it's part of a collaborated service. We need to liaise with the other stakeholders before we can just say, yes, we'll do it. Whilst I'd like to give you a timescale, we need to have conversations with our collaborated partners before we can.
Okay, so when we say we're committed to VCOP, we can't actually give any evaluation against the 12 stages of VCOP.
I'll say we are absolutely committed to VCOP, but we can't just click our fingers because other collaborated partners, we have to go at the pace that they're prepared to go at, if they're prepared to go there at all. If they're not, there's an easy way to do it and there's a hard way to do it. We'd rather do it the easy way. If we have to do it the hard way, then we'll do it the hard way. But what I can't do is sit here and say it'll be by this time, because I can't plot the easy way to do that at this moment in time.
Are there any discussions with partners at the moment about this?
There are indeed, and you know, there's a reluctance on the part of one of our partners to proceed in that way at this moment, which is part of the problem that we're experiencing. But we will overcome that, and you know, we'll overcome it the easy way or the hard way, because we are committed to the VCOP element.
Right.
I can't understand why any partner wouldn't want to do it. I mean, some of the 12 stages are simple things like giving a crime number. So why wouldn't we want to do that? As often
is the case, Claire, we agree entirely.
Okay, it seems a shame, but never mind.
Okay.
I haven't read off yet, so it's but we'll get there.
Okay, great. If we move on to the 11.4 again, around police data trends, including stop and search breakdown. I think that's you again, Sean.
Yeah, and again, Claire, did you just want me to summarise Q4, because I know you said on the stop search scrutiny panel, and just in terms of where we are in relation to certain aspects of that.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting just to have kind of the latest figure, the disparity figure, the plans that the Chief Constable mentioned around on how we understand it better would be great to communicate to the public. Thank you.
Okay, fabulous. So our stop search data is chunked up into the quarters. So we get quarterly data. We've just had Q4 data come through, and we utilised that both in our internal scrutiny panels and our external scrutiny panels, whereby we have partners and valued members of the community talking through the good, the bad, and how we can improve and how we can learn. So our current data, and it's interesting to note that in terms of that national data, the disproportionality rates for black people being stop search are 1 to 9, and Asian 1 to 2.5. Where we are in Q4 is Black is 1 to 5.77 and Asian is 1 to 3.41. And again, you can make that comparison to the national figures, but what we appreciate and accept is that still not good enough. And we've got to understand that detail more and the impact. And that range differs hugely within the county itself. And as we know, we've got a hugely diverse community, county, and the three areas are very, very different. If I was to pick just Black in isolation, in Luton, it's 1 to 2.68, whereas in Central Beds, it's 1 to 12.68. So that's a huge difference there in terms of that raw data. But what are we learning from that and what are we doing? So as part of that scrutiny panel and as part of that quarterly data, we can identify our officers. We can identify which officers utilise Stop Search the most, but also which officers are highlighted as whether they're one extreme or the other in terms of disproportionality. So we would be able to identify if one officer Stop Search 25 people and 23 of those were from the Asian population. What we can also identify and overlay is the outcome. So are some of our officers stop searching, and as a result of that, there's no further action, or are they positive stop searches in terms of the reasons and the grounds for why that stop search is being committed? And what we do with that is that every quarter, because we want to learn and improve the way we do things, chief inspectors across the organisation have conversations with those officers with a view to extracting what that looks like. Because it may be that one of our officers was on a specific operation in a specific area, and that is proportionate in terms of the outcome. So it's about having those conversations. As a result of those conversations, we then determine what happens, whether or not there's some learning to be taken out of that, or whether or not we can justify that. And some of that is fed back to the scrutiny panel. As a whole, though, to supplement that and the excellent work that we do with our partners in our community, we recently commissioned and delivered some training across the organisation. And the basis of that training was, one, to reinforce and remind our officers about the powers and the use of Stop Search, but also to understand what it felt like to members of our community to being Stop Searched. And that had a huge impact on our officers. Sometimes when we deliver this training, and the nervousness that I had was actually that our Stop Search would go down because people were thinking, oh, there's lots of scrutiny on Stop Search, I'm not going to do it because people are pointing the finger. The excellent news was in June, we had record levels of Stop Search in our hotspot areas. So that's really good. What we've got to do is have a review that data, look at those individuals and continue that learning. What we've just had is because we've had our Q4 data, we've now got some really rich data for the whole year. And what we're able to do is extract some of that and again, overlay it with some other key areas in terms of outcomes and reasons for Stop Search. And that's the process we'll move into in the next month in terms of really dissecting that detail and that data. If I reflect that again and just talk about use of force, the use of force is when an officer, and again, it's really important to make sure that we articulate this correctly, because use of force for some people may be just excessive. It's not. If I put hands on someone, even if that person is compliant, but I place handcuffs on that person, that's deemed use of force. So not all use of force may be what some people think of in terms of force. It may be compliant. And again, we identified that our understanding and our commitment to use of force needed to improve. And so we put in some local measures to ensure that it's at the same standing as Stop Search. We've got a dedicated superintendent that leads on that portfolio. And again, we review the similar data in terms of disproportionality and then why and the outcomes. And no different, the next stage will be that year data, so we can extract that and make sure that we can learn lessons and provide that reassurance to our public that we are using these powers that we're affording, both legitimately and professionally. I'll pause for questions and/or I'm sure the Chief may have some comments as well.
Are we able to drill down in terms of the data that's available to the people themselves who are being stop searched? So, for example, are we able to tell from the data if a particular individual has been stopped 5 times in a quarter, for example?
Yes, we can. Yes. Yeah.
Right. Are we having any conversations with those people, especially if there's been nothing found on them? And the reason why I ask that is this. Personally, and I don't mind saying this publicly, I have no problems with somebody being stopped multiple times when something is found on them, because they're dangerous people and they need to be, that needs to be addressed. But I have issues about somebody being stopped multiple times and nothing being found on them, and then they get stopped again. But no one is having a conversation with them as to what is going on, why, and so on and so forth. Are we able to put something in place for someone that will find themselves in this situation?
And again, I know we can extract that data. At this stage, Festus, I don't think we utilise that data in that manner, other than if there's a flag up in terms of those officers who are stopping those people. There's 2 elements that we're working on, and that is, again, leaving material and information with every person that stops search so that they can make contact and feedback about their experience. And then again, overlaying that with individuals who, similar to being victims of crime, who may be repeat victims, or individuals who are stop searched a number of occasions. I'll have a look in terms of how we can identify that and be proactive in terms of approaching those individuals and maybe asking them to share their experience.
Precisely. The reason why I say that is because if I go from my experience with stop search, to be quite frank with you, when these things happen, the last thing you have time to do is to wait for a piece of paper to be given to you. You want to just, get about your business as soon as possible. And the reality as well is that, I'm almost certain that it is not in all cases that officers provide individuals with the paperwork, because in some cases people just say, okay, I'll give you my email address and then we can send this to them by email. I'm not sure if this always happens because I don't think everyone makes good use of it. ToServe, I think it is called. So I think whilst we hope for the best in terms of best practice in that regard, I think we should also be looking at being a bit more proactive in reaching out to people who have had those experiences, trying to learn from them, and just because if they have concerns that they don't want, that they will ordinarily not volunteer, which would be useful for us, how about if we go to them to get their feedback?
So we've just had a look at a scheme which I think the Met have had a look at as well, which enables some of that to an extent, and I won't go into the detail of it here because it's potentially subject of ongoing discussions. I don't know if that will be the best scheme or if we can do something that we do locally ourselves anyway, rather than expending potentially quite a significant sum of money to put that in place. But I suppose my overarching ambition for Stop and Search would be this. Stop and Search, I think, firstly, is potentially a very useful operational policing tool for us. We know, we see at first hand the number of weapons it takes off our streets, and we know then that the consequence of that can have in terms of preventing serious youth violence. And indeed, if we stop one murder as a result of a Stop and Search, then that's a fantastic result. So Stop and Search has its place. What I want all of our officers to be confident in utilising Stop and Search, but importantly, it's really important as well that our community are confident in our utilisation of Stop and Search as well. So I do think we've got really good scrutiny arrangements that give a degree of community confidence, and you will know that as a result of that community scrutiny panel work over a number of years, the quality of our stop and search interactions has gone up by over 20% in that period of time. And there's very much a learning cycle, which is driven by everybody's involvement in that. I think it's an excellent forum where officers get feedback around the performance of stop and search. But we also know that nationally and locally, there is unexplained disparity at the moment within the stop and search system. And we know that has a significant impact in terms of the confidence specifically of our black communities, which we need to address as well. So I think what you're talking about is that ability to engage with communities in a different way and understand that. And there was a pledge that all chiefs signed up to in 2018, before I was a chief actually. I would share the sentiment then and do now. And that is, it was one of the LAMI recommendations, which is where we have unexplained disparity, we should seek to understand it, and then we should seek to explain it. And I think we're getting to a level of granularity now where I think we're probably about 80% of the way towards properly understanding our stop and search data and activity. And I think when we do that, we then explain that to our communities and we look to what we can do to bridge that confidence gap that currently is in existence with our black community specifically, but also our other ethnic minorities where disparity exists as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Unless anyone else has got anything else to add, can we move on to the 11.5 on recruitment and retention, please, and attrition, actually. Do we have, who's got that one?
Take that, Festus. And I'll be fairly brief because I'm conscious of time, but I just thought helpful in terms of giving a bit of an update of where we are. So I think I reported last time that our plan was that we would be in excess of the uplift target that had been set by government, and that is still the case by the end of the financial year 21-22. So far this year, we should have recruited 34 people. We've recruited 32, but we, as I say, are still on target to exceed the uplift. Out of those 32 that we have recruited, 20% of those are visible Black, Asian and minority ethnic officers, and that compares to a total of 9.8% of those in 2021. So a big increase so far. And I will say so far, we've only had 2 intakes, so it's work we need to keep pressing. And that compares to a national average of 7.1. But I'm not always sure the national average means a lot to us, because actually we're a bit of an outlier on that in terms of actually we're looking to get to 30% rather than the national average. And I think also what I should mention in there is female. So of that intake, of those intakes, 32, 40% were female, which I think we can compare against the national average, and that's 31% national average. So doing well on both fronts, but still more work to do. Next 2 intakes, July and August. One of those is our standard student officer intake, and one of those is our accelerated detective constable programme. We think, based on the numbers we've got at the moment, we will recruit all 35 of those students, and we think 25% of those will be visible Black, Asian and minority ethnic officers. In the detective constable programme, out of the 20 recruits, we think at least 6 of those will be visible Black, Asian and minority ethnic, which is really, really good and really good positive work that we're doing around that. So going in the right direction, as I say, it's something we need to keep a focus on because it can slip. But I think with some of the restrictions being lessened, we are getting out there a bit more now, chatting to the communities, chatting to the public, and trying to continue to make sure that pool is representative of our communities. If I then look at leavers, so in the first 3 months of the year, we have seen 21 leavers. 9 of those are officers with less than 2 years service, and those 9 are mixed in terms of those that have been dismissed, unfortunately, those that have had performance issues within their probationary period that we've allowed to go on what's called Regulation 13, and that is why we have a probationary period, so we can work out whether it's right for them or right for us. And there was an interesting one that we lost 4 people due to the not being what they expected it to be in terms of the work-life balance. And it was interesting that we just need to do a bit of work on that because all 4 of those were over 30 years old. So it's just, I think, the mix between family life, most probably, and policing hasn't quite met their expectation. So we're just doing a bit of work just to understand that a little bit more. But I think I said last time round, we were looking at a turnover rate around about, or attrition rate around about 9% for the year. Previous years has been just over 10%. We're currently at 6.2%, with a national average somewhere around 7 and 8%. So at the moment, and I am touching my desk, which is made of wood, that we just keep that up and understand it. But I think last time what I said to you was I'll come back in January once we've put all this in place, and we can hopefully come back to you and show that we've maintained what I've just outlined for the first 2 months. And happily take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much. I mean, those are quite promising, Phil, and thank you very much for the work you've put into getting that information out for us. Now, I'm just drilling into so what's the overall headcount in terms of offices that we've got at the moment this year, or that we will have by the end of this year?
At the end of this year, just bear with me 2 seconds, Festus, I'll pull it up for you. We are looking to end up with 1,416 headcount.
And when I say year, that's financial year or a calendar year?
Yes, so that is as at 31st of March 22.
Okay. And when was the last time we had that many police officers?
I've been here 20 plus years, and
I wasn't expecting you to tell us how long, Phil. I'm giving away your age here, but anyway.
I don't think I can us having that number of officers.
Okay.
And as a child, Commissioner, don't worry.
205.
Yeah, and Phil still looks like about 21, but there you go. So, and what is the obviously the average retention rate from what you're telling me so far is roughly about the attrition rate is about 6%, right?
For us at the moment, it's about 6%, and I'm hearing that the national average is around 7 to 8%, Festus.
Right, but that's of the new cohort rather than overall, or that's overall?
That's overall. So that is basically nationally, we are seeing between 7 and 8% of our officers against the overall numbers leave the policing during the year. And obviously that's made up of people that are retiring, resignations, so all kinds of attrition.
And I want to ask about exit interviews. Are these happening for everyone?
But I won't put my hand on my hat and say absolutely it's happening for everyone. It is an area that we are digging into, and I think I mentioned last time that's the sort of thing I'd hopefully come back to in January to say we started off quite slowly, but by the time we get there, you can see that actually we are understanding a little bit more around those exit interviews. We are gathering more information about why people are exiting and understanding that a little bit through our work through the student development officers. But I won't sit here and say we are meeting every single person that is leaving the organisation. And that might be twofold, Festus. There might be also the bits in there around people not wanting an exit interview, but I'm not sure that is the main reason, if I'm being honest.
Right, because I think that is something that would be really, really helpful. But I think if it got to the point where people are wanting to leave us without even wanting to talk to us, I think that probably means things have gotten quite bad. But Claire, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, a few questions if I can just on that. So great rates for the couple of new intakes that are coming in. What does that make us overall for the force in terms of Black and minority ethnic number, percentage wise?
So you might have to bear with me, Claire. I'm not sure if I have that figure to hand, but it's going to be close to 10%, but don't categorically state that at this stage because I'll pick that up and check it.
Okay, no problem. While we're looking at that one, just in terms of recruitment, we are getting people contact the OPCC to say that we understand recruitment from start to finish takes the minimum of 9 months, but we're getting people reaching out saying that they've been past the approved stages for nearly 1 year and that there does appear to still be a backlog. I know the force spent a lot of time trying to get rid of some of those hurdles that are in the way. Where are we with trying to withdraw some of those hurdles that seem to have crept back in to try and assist with those? Because people are telling us they're giving up on the system and getting jobs elsewhere.
Okay, so our pool at the moment is really healthy. In terms of that April intake where we're expecting 15 and we got 11, a lot of that was down to the backlog around our OH service. The chiefs agreed quite recently some investment into that OH service because of the additional increase around uplift. And as I say, all I can sit here and say at the moment, Claire, is we achieved the maximum that we were expecting in June. We've got 38 in the pool for ADCP for 20 vacancies, and we're going to fill the July intake with 15. So there are definitely making inroads in terms of making sure that pool is sufficient to deal with the intakes we've got.
That's good. I suppose it is just reputationally when people don't have a good experience and go elsewhere and they tell others, that's not what we would be looking for. Just in terms of attrition, we had that data come for Police and Crime Panel that were asking about it, and the Special Constabulary, they were 3 times more likely to quit than regulars at the moment. Are you aware of that figure and looking at it? Is that something the force are dealing with?
Yep, so we see all of the information at Force Exec for staff, officers, specials. So we are aware of the attrition. And as you must be aware, and I think we mentioned it at last Strat Board, there has been the review around specials, and we've put the extra resource in there to keep an eye in terms of the development around that. So yeah, it's something we're aware of and something we're keeping an eye on, Claire.
Okay, so hopefully we're going to see that attrition rate go in the right direction for specials in the future.
Just on that specials attrition, I think there's a couple of factors in there. So firstly, a number of our specials are taking the opportunity of uplift to join the organisation, which is good. We're healthy, we want to see that. We also know that not all of our specials are fans of the review that we've undertaken. And some of them are choosing, and sadly some of them that have made a fantastic contribution and give many hours to policing are choosing that they don't want to operate under that new model as well. So we will lose some people from there, and that is regrettable. But we have a healthy pipeline of other people coming in, and we think ultimately that the benefits we'll get from having a tasked and focused and well-aligned Special Constabulary will outweigh the overall loss of those individuals, albeit we're sad to see them go. But I think the attrition piece as well overall is quite an interesting piece. So Bedfordshire has the highest proportion of officers with less than 5 years service than any force in the country. And given that most people leave policing within their first 3 years, we would expect to have the highest attrition rate of any force in the country if you follow that through. But because it's multifactorial and there's other things that focus in there as well, it isn't quite as straightforward as that. But we do recognise that we have some additional work to do to focus on our retention piece, specifically with our young in service officers, a lot of which is linked to the culture of the organisation.
I agree with you, because when Phil said the attrition rate was 6.2, that's unusual because normally it's between 8 and 11 just for us. So to have that gap, it will be really interesting to see what it is next time as well.
Well, I think and then saying we'll bring that back to January, because then we'll have a bit of a longer period of time to assess if it's anything we've done or if it's just a coincidence of numbers.
Yeah, because it was quite high last month, so it's interesting that it's gone right down. My last point was around the website, just in terms of recruitment. When you go on it, there is the option to say whether you got all the information that you needed. I noticed that it was quite high. People are saying that it didn't have what they needed. Have we got someone looking at that to improve the information on it?
Yeah, we can review that, Claire. It's constantly reviewed, but if you've noticed something that's not working quite well, we'll just have a look at get comms to have a look at it. But it has been overhauled quite recently, and actually the level of positivity we're getting around the website and the number of hits has grown considerably. But we will have a look at that and make sure that it's working effectively. Yeah,
the hits look good. It's that option where you can say whether you got the information. It will show you how many people liked it or didn't like it. I just thought it also asks you what didn't you like. I wonder who's looking at that, because I hope it's not just sat somewhere, because somebody might be able to go through it and get some quick wins. Yeah, but that's it. Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, we'll check that.
And sorry, I just come back on the length of time one as well, because I know that is a concern. And if there are people watching this on webcast as well, I would just urge them to stick with it and be patient. I mean, sadly, it can take an awfully long time to get through the process. And then because everybody's recruiting. I know that we're not the only force that's in that position. Other forces are in similar position as well. But please do be patient. For anybody that's watching this, that's thinking about joining, it's in the process. Please do be patient. It's the best job in the world, and I think Bedfordshire is the best force in the country to come and join as well. So
I absolutely agree with you, by the way, on both counts. So if we move on to number 12 on the agenda item. Now, this actually came about as a result of one of my wandering around stations, and this interpreting service, big word, and the word that one of the officers used to describe it, actually, I won't repeat what they said. It wasn't great. What are you aware of any issues at all being brought to your attention?
Thank you, Festus. Yeah, and as you say, we use a provider called Big Word for interpreter services. We've used them for over 2 years now, and we're not the only ones who use them. We use them in collaboration with our local regional partners. There is a very simple and effective feedback process aligned to anyone who uses Big Word. Now, that is managed locally at Chief Inspector level, and then across the 3 force at superintendent level, and then that falls into our regional custody forum, which is chaired at DCC level. They are not reporting any wider issues. So there may be 2 things here. One is that there aren't any issues, or 2, people aren't submitting the feedback. Like you, I spend a lot of time walking about, and just this week, because I knew it was on the agenda, I spoke with 3 teams: custody, inquiry office, and response, who all use that service, and not one of them said that they were experiencing any issues. So if there are specific concerns and issues, they need to be fed back, because we need to get value for money and a service that we are paying for. And if people don't know that there is a mechanism in place, we'll showcase what that looks like so people do use it.
So what I'll probably do is that I will touch base with the sergeants, and I will see if they'll be happy to actually just drop you an email or something with their concerns.
Definitely.
Very, very good. Thank you very much. Then we go on to 12.2, more on specials. Now, about the review that's going to come again, updates on who's doing the DCC verbal update on that one?
I'll have a stab at that one, Commissioner.
Okay, please go ahead.
He can tell me how I did when he watches the recording. So I think you were particularly interested around the recruitment and training for our new special constables, and then also the ongoing training programme for special constables as they're deployed as part of the review. So as I think you may be aware, ownership of both the recruitment and training for our new special constable colleagues has now migrated from Citizens in Policing in Force to the collaborated learning and development function, which means now L&D hold responsibility for all those training courses for the Special Police Constabulary for new entrants. Once they're then accredited through their training, they'll move across to be offered training that their regular counterparts get, and they'll get that on their respective teams and departments. And so we've got quite a healthy waiting list again around Special Constabulary. And in terms of the, and I'll come back to training a little bit, but in terms of the current numbers of people waiting, we've got 11 awaiting shortlisting, 27 awaiting pre-employment checks, and 21 awaiting initial course. And the Black and Asian minority ethnic breakdown of that is 14.58% of those are made up from representative communities. I don't have the breakdown for male female on that as well, but we've got an attraction and engagement officer who is part of L&D who will give that thematic ownership. Has been given thematic ownership of both our special constables and our PCSOs, which means, as Phil mentioned, we can start to target that recruitment activity as we come out of lockdown as well and get them out there. So back to the training. Now that we've got the special constables integrating into regular teams, they'll be going to all training sessions that are held. if they're available to do that. And that's seen us recently have our special constables receive both COTS training and speed gun training. And COTS is Sean will correct me, but I think it's our tasking system, is it, Sean? Yeah, okay, good, got that right. And we've then got bespoke special constable training, which is recently included, and that's delivered by Susie Carr, who's our special constable coordinator. So she's recently delivered victim and witness statement taking training sessions, which will continue. We've got national leadership training to our special inspectors and sergeants, and also professional standards input into all of our professional sergeants and inspectors for specials. We're going to have some wider mandatory professional standards inputs covering all of the special constabulary, but that will continue throughout the course of the year. So very much what we're doing is aligning it to the normal training and having bespoke training where that's required over and above that that's delivered by L&D. In addition to that, as part of the review, we've got special constabulary pathways. So when you have so we're going to be attaching people to response teams for 12 months now rather than 6 months, so they can do their PACs or their policing activities to get to an independent patrol status. And it's about ensuring that the vast majority of our special constables are all at independent patrol status and they feel comfortable and competent in discharging their duties. So once they've got that, they can either stay on response or they can be aligned to a community policing team, because as Sean mentioned, 60% are now aligned to community policing teams. Or there'll be other opportunities for those who want to be career special and have a certain set of skills, for example, to pursue particular interests. So I know we've got one special constable who's recently been deployed into the PPU because of their personal background that they've got in social care. And they are contributing significantly already in that and thoroughly enjoying it. I know we've got other special constables who are trained in public order, and we're looking to develop career pathways for almost any specialism within the organisation, but including things like roads policing, cybercrime, and any number of things that we can do to harness those skills and use them productively. So I'll pause there probably and take any questions.
It's just on that one. I'm glad to hear that we've got a pool that we can rely on for over summer, because those posts you mentioned don't start until September. So you've got a bit of a lag to kind of get that going again over summer.
Sorry, which post? Okay.
The recruitment and retention ones. So they won't be released until September.
In the L&D.
Yeah,
so that will correspond, because there's been no point having them in place now because we couldn't go out into the community and do a lot with them until we came out of lockdown anyway. But so that's absolutely the plan, is to have them in place, and we've got the pool that carries us through to that point.
So that's about, if my math is okay, we're looking at roughly about 60 people that's sort of like waiting to join the specials.
Yeah, that's about right.
That is pretty good.
We'd always like more. Again, for anybody that's watching, our commissioner can advocate the benefits and enjoyment that you can get from the special constabulary, as can I. I started my career as a special constable, so it is a great thing to do. And you know, I have an ambition where we have a lot more specials in the organisation than we currently do. Our pressure has been around having to deliver on the uplift numbers at the same time as trying to grow the special constabulary, because obviously we've only got so much capacity to deliver all of that through HR, through vetting, through L&D. But definitely we are very keen to grow our special constabulary and make it even stronger than it already is, and enable them to continue to contribute fantastically to the organisation the way that they do.
And Gary, in terms of the welfare and support and everything else that's available for specials, and also some of our volunteers as well. So a lot of the the ones that's available for regular officers at the moment, will those be available to specials as well?
Absolutely. There's no differentiation in the offer we give for welfare support for our special constable colleagues to regular colleagues or police staff. So absolutely the same.
Very good. That's pretty much all I wanted to ask in terms of agenda 12.2. Unless there's anything else anyone else wants to ask or contribute. If we move to number 13, get a monthly performance update for the Veru.
Thank you. I'm mindful of time and the fact that there is a paper. I'm not going to go through the whole paper, but what I'm going to take advantage of is just to highlight a couple of key headlines. And I know it's an area Commissioner, that you're very passionate about. So it's a fabulous network that we have in our Veru, and it's led by the amazing Kimberly Campbell-Lamb. It goes from strength to strength. In May, in the month of May, we had 10 referrals into the Veru, and that led it up to 77 open referrals. However, because of the tragic events that we've already talked about and the work that they do within our communities, in June alone, we had 21 referrals. We've never had so many come into the Veru. And that's a mix of both males and females. It's a mix across the whole of the county, Bedford, Central Beds and Luton. And the most prominent age are those people that we really want to work with in terms of intervention and diversion, the most prominent group being the 14 to 17-year-olds. What we'll get back this month, and it won't be until the end of the month, so it probably won't come here until August, is both a local and a national evaluation. But at the most recent Veru Oversight Board, we got an insight, and again, very complimentary in terms of the work that the Veru were doing. Most importantly, over the last month, and I know you're cited, Commissioner, because you were part of it. There was some great exposure done by Look East in terms of some of the initiatives, and particularly the Barbering Academy and Boxing Saves Lives. And July equally busy in terms of communication, engagement, and actual intervention and diversion. Kick-off at 3 is another sporting campaign, and we've got 3 days of community engagement across Luton. And again, I know you're heavily involved in that. But to finish on, if I just signpost and share, raise awareness around BAVEX, Bedfordshire Against Violence and Exploitation, an amazing campaign which seeks to support families, friends, and those affected individually. I've seen the parenting webinar that's going to go out, and that's excellent. So if I can use this opportunity just to raise awareness around BAVEX and get people to look at that website and sign up to some of that material, it will really help signpost and support people who are close to individuals that may be subject to exploitation.
That's very good. Thank you very much for that. And I think on behalf of all of us, I would certainly want to thank the Veru for the really fantastic job that they're doing. It's not an easy job, no doubt, but I have to, take my hat off to them and thank the team for all they do, and all the partners, of course, that join in and support their efforts. So thank you to them for that. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask Sean about this, please? Claire?
Yeah, just a few. You're right, Sean. That input that St Charles Trust do for those parenting days is phenomenal. So you're quite right to highlight that. They are a really good organisation. Just going through it, the 166 over the 2 years, it's great that we've had that amount of support for those individuals. I think where we want to start going to is really speaking to government about the funding on Veru. We know that the year-to-year funding is not ideal, and if we can start showing some of the outcomes to them, that might help. So it's great communicating around the workshops that go on and those different things. But I think if we can talk about how many young people come into Veru and then how many people come out in a really healthy way, that would be great. It's just something that I haven't seen in any of the documents yet that we might want to start thinking about, to really push on those doors and say, we need this embedded, but we've got to be able to prove why it works. Thank you.
Okay, and I mean, I totally agree about the funding. Just this morning, we were in a meeting with other PCCs, and those of us who were in receipt of the Violence Reduction Unit funding, this is an issue, because obviously if you're going to be commissioning work with partners, it takes them some time sometimes to get resources in, and they want to know that they have what do you call it, longer term planning in place to keep staff on the job. But with the current year-on-year funding thing, it's just not a good way to go. So we will be working with the government. We will be pushing for this. and we'll see what comes out of that. Now, number 14, there's nothing I want to raise for the next meeting. I think we need to probably just finish there, unless there's any items for the July meeting. Any more thing we should flag up for now? Where?
Yeah, there's probably a couple that we want to look at, just in terms of, so the force are moving to a file quality team. It'd be nice to understand why we went that way instead of case builders to help. So that would be a nice one for the next one. And the other one, it's probably worth us going into the force risk register a little bit more. I saw other things in it, like at number 5, the consideration of getting rid of blue notebooks and moving to 2Serve. You know, I think you might have a bit of a rebellion on your hands if that's the way that you move. So probably risk register and file management would be good ones to consider, Commissioner.
Okay, that's great. And I think it's probably likely that we will, I would like to just keep some of the current agenda items on the agenda, so we just get a regular update on these. So sorry if it becomes a bit repetitive. I think it's just good for us to be on top of things, and also for the public to know that we are on top of this on their behalf as well. But I can't think of anything else that needs to go on there. But apart from that, thank you all very much for your time. And for those of you who are joining us and who've taken part, thank you for watching as well. And we will see you next month.
Thanks very much. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.